Good evening, Xavier, Musketeer basketball fans. It's February 18th, President's Day. Happy President's Day. And this is the RaGing X Report with your host, Jim Reeker, and top analyst, Bill Gabriel. And Musketeers, at the end of this week, get back to 500 at 13-13, move up in the league a little bit with two big wins. They're 5-8 in the Big East. Good week for the Musketeers, but let's bring in Bill and start hashing through it. How you doing tonight, Bill?
Hey, I'm doing just great, Jim. How are you?
I'm great. Did you have a good President's Day? A little time off from work there?
Yeah, it was nice. I just wrapped up a game of Candyland, so I'm good to go.
Were you a winner tonight? Like the Musketeers all week?
It's hard to duplicate that same success that the Muskies have experienced. But, yeah, it was a great week to be a Muskie fan.
2-0 just when we thought, wow, there was talk, will they win again this year? That was a serious conversation. In fact, I heard, if they don't get by Creighton, who's kind of down the bottom with them and a team they had at home, some people said it might be all she wrote. But the Musketeers somehow came through in an overtime win last Wednesday night, I believe that was. So we were down there, and maybe propelled them into a winning streak here, maybe in finishing the season. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about that Creighton win. Xavier 64, Creighton 61 overtime, and there was a big play at the end of regulation. The Blue Jays kind of made a key mistake, allowing the Musketeers to score two there at the end to tie it up and take it to overtime. What was the key for Xavier pulling that game out Wednesday night?
Their defense and making that guy make a bad pass and Quentin getting to it before it went out of bounds and being able to lay it up and in. Because, you start looking at the numbers of that game, and you're like, there's no way Xavier should win this game until you look at Creighton's numbers. And you're like, oh, my gosh, you realize how ugly of a game it was. Creighton, they were attempting to fire, make baskets with balls that were 3 times bigger than regulation or something, because they really struggled in that game. A lot of it was attributed to X's excellent defense. They really have played some great defense these two games. They held Creighton to 40% from the floor in the second half. I think they held them to, about 35% from the three-point line, which for Creighton to beat you, and when they do beat you, they're shooting close to 40, and they're just stroking it from the outside. And probably the biggest key to that was they didn't let Creighton shoot a free throw in the second half. They forced them into nothing but jump shots. When you have a jump shooting team, a team trying to shoot jump shots and they're not hitting, that makes your defense a lot better. Keeping them out of the paint and they're not driving, that's pretty remarkable. I think their defense really has set the tone in that game for them, and enabled them to get that tied up in regulation, because I thought, man, as well as they kind of had played and as poorly as both teams shot the basketball in that game, they just weren't going to be able to handle that as a defeat if it happened, and then lo and behold, the gift was given. It enabled them to tie it up.
Yeah, and I got numbers here that I have Creighton shooting 31% from the three-point line, and they usually shoot 40%, and actually only shooting 35% overall, and they usually shoot 48%. And, that's what they've been known for, the up and down and let the threes fly. They were one of the top shooting three-point teams in the country. In fact, sometimes I think they shoot more threes than twos. Of course, you got to go back to the game a little over a week ago out in Omaha, where they kind of turned things around and went inside out against the Musketeers and didn't use the three all that much until a little bit into the second half. So But it's kind of been an Achilles heel of the Musketeers all year long is defending the three. And to do it so well in that game, obviously they had prepared for it. They knew that even though that isn't what they had done to them in Omaha, it's probably what they were going to try to do again. I agree with you. It was a great defensive performance. And actually a couple other stats I have here that are amazing. 7 steals, 4 by Quentin Gooden, and 9 blocks, and 3 of those by Zach Hankins. And that just helped lead to the great defensive performance. Yeah, and if you remember, it was actually, I look back, 102, just a little over a minute. Najee hit a 3, I believe, from the corner just to pull the Musketeers back within 2. And then, of course, they came down, and I can't remember quite what the sequence was, but Creighton had the ball side out. I think Xavier actually called a timeout. Somebody called a timeout, and Xavier came out. I remember Coach Steele saying it was a diamond press they were playing, and as the guy broke into the backcourt to try to get open, the pass was thrown, and he kind of broke the other way, and Quentin picked it up kind of on the run and laid it in actually without a dribble. It was just kind of an amazing play. You just thought, wow, did the Musketeers need that? And, of course, they had to continue to play defense to get the game to overtime. Another thing that happened in that game, maybe you can comment on a little bit, was Coach Steele set Paul Scruggs down. We were talking about maybe for the last 10 minutes he just wasn't playing well. Had 5 or 6 turnovers in the game, had like 2 or 3 in a row. Do you think that had an impact on the game, an impact on Paul? It worked out. What are your thoughts about that move?
I thought, at the time he probably had to do it. I mean, he was just kind of out of control. He had 4, I just went for the last, 5 minutes he was on the floor or something like that, 8 minutes. 8 minutes he was on the floor. He had 4 turnovers and 4 times possessing the ball. So I'm pretty sure that was it. Just tired of seeing that. I don't know. I don't know how well that set in because I think he led the Muskies in turnovers. Or I know he had quite a few. I know he had quite a few against Providence in the next game. So I don't know. That just kind of seems to be his new mode of operation. He's either forcing things or getting out of control, and that's causing him to turn the ball over. And they couldn't afford it in that game. It was just too nip and tuck. I mean, that's the 4 turnovers when you're either tied or within 1 basket of your opponent, and you're getting nothing. That's just. And giving them another chance, that's tough. And I think Coach Steele just felt he had to do it.
Well, and the kind of positive after it all panned out with the win and all, Elias Harden got some important minutes in a game out on the floor. And, that's what we talked about all year, that the Musketeers have been a little bit thin on the bench. And so maybe that plays out another positive out of the whole situation. Elias didn't light it up or anything, but he plays good defense while he's out there, and he handles the ball fairly well, and he wasn't turning the ball over. So maybe it'll all shake out. We get to see Elias a little bit more. And I think we'd agree that, part of we talked about, I think, last week, part of the reason we thought the Musketeers weren't finishing games at the end is some of their guys like Gooden and Scruggs and Marshall were just playing so many minutes and seemed to be tired at the end of the games. So maybe a couple positives come out of that. Yeah, and I would say, going back to the losing streak, which we'd all like to forget, but actually there was a stretch there. I thought Paul Scruggs was their best player on the floor many games, their best three-point shooter, seemed to be running the team maybe when Quentin was in foul trouble, or a couple games even there back a while when Quentin was hurt, when they beat Georgetown and Butler without him. And Paul played the point, played 40 minutes. And so I think he's just kind of in a little bit of a funk. He did play, I think, a little bit better on Saturday. But, hopefully we can get him turned around. That could maybe help this Musketeer resurrection. Well, we go to Providence, and, of course, it kind of stacked up. You thought, if I can't beat Creighton at home, Now, okay, we go to Providence when Providence is kind of down at the bottom of the league too, so another good opponent to be facing, but we're facing them on the road, and that's a tough place to play. In fact, I believe the Friars were one of the Musketeers' losses last year in their championship season at Providence. And I read today that Ed Cooley said that may have been the worst performance of a Friar team, especially at home, in his entire tenure there at Providence. So let's talk about the Providence game. Again, what was the key?
Oh, the key to the Providence game was they're pretty close in the first half. Neither team was lighting it up in the first half of that game. And the big strength for Providence in that was they had the only offensive rebounds of the first half, and I think the big center, I can't think of his name right now.
Dave Watson.
Yeah, Watson. Yeah, he had three of those and put each one of them back, and that was pretty much the lead that they had. It was 26-32 or 4 at half. I can't remember.
32-26 at halftime.
Yeah.
So
that was
scored right at the end of pull within 6.
Yes, that was the lead that they had. That Providence had was those 3 offensive rebounds and putbacks. I mean, pretty much they were trading baskets, and they weren't trading them very well. I think they both shot pretty poorly in the first half. Both had some turnovers. And then they come out the second half, and all of a sudden that hoop looked like the Atlantic Ocean to the Musketeers. They were throwing balls up, and they couldn't miss.
You're going to have those days, yeah. And these are just amazing stats. 59% from the floor, 57% from three-point range. That has to be a season high best. Scoring was pretty balanced. Hankins 13, Jones 19, Najee Marshall 14, Quentin Gooden 13, and Tyreek Jones 19 points and 12 rebounds. Of course, this is kind of a homecoming for him. Him being from Connecticut, it's one of the closest venues. That's a Tyreek Jones. I think we've all hoped he would be. If he could play like that every game, he'd give the Musketeers a chance to win anywhere.
Well, yeah, it was interesting in the game. The announcers were talking, and they were comparing the two centers, and the center for Providence, he kind of made a move, and he did it real quick and took a rushed shot. It was kind of like a little flipped hook. And next, I think within 2 possessions, Xavier did something, and Tyreek caught exactly like the same kind of pass, turned under control, gathered himself, and exploded up and dunked it. And they're like, that's the difference right now between where those guys are at in their development, which was a huge compliment for Tyreek. That second half, I mean, that was amazing. The half stats are even scarier. I think you were reading off the game. They were 73% from the floor and 86% from 3 in the second half. They only missed 1 3-pointer.
Yeah, and we know that's not going to be true all year long. But again, and you kind of mentioned it as we were talking about Creighton, I think you have to agree, another key in this game was the defense. And here's one that, and I know I talk about it because he doesn't play well against Xavier, but he has great stats. I remember looking at him, it was like 17 points and 8 rebounds a game. That's Alpha Diallo. They held him to 7 points and 2 rebounds. And I believe, and you may remember better than me, that it may have been different guys at different times, but I believe Quentin was on him quite a bit during the game. Do you recall?
Yeah, it looked like he was on him, and they were rolling Marshall onto him some. When it based on whatever I think the specifics of the lineup were. I think sometimes they went a little bigger, that Providence did, and then so that would put Marshall on, or that would put Marshall on him, and then if they went smaller, then they would switch Quentin onto him, or something, however the matchups were going. I was trying to remember that, or flip that maybe when they went bigger. Najee would be on him. When they went smaller, Q would. But yeah, they did a nice job on him. Really stayed in front of him and were making him work. Yeah, it's just and the way the bench players and the senior grad transfers played in that half the whole game was really, really beneficial for Xavier.
Yeah, Ryan
Harden had another nice game.
Yeah, Wellage hit a couple threes, I think, and we really like to see that start to develop. That's kind of a thing that, we expected, and actually I think they said it during that game, and you had mentioned it before that, he was a leading scorer out of San Jose State, but just probably has not seen the defensive pressure that he sees in the Big East, that he didn't see that out there. But hopefully maybe he's getting used to it, and maybe he will be a factor here down the stretch.
Yeah, I tell you what, the way Harden shot the ball a little bit there and has played in these last two games, I think he's going to be someone who's going to contribute a little bit.
Well, that's supposedly Elias Harden's, he came in, he was supposed to be a pretty good shooter and a three-point shooter, and we haven't really seen much of that. Of course, it's, kind of hard to get your rhythm sometimes when you're not getting a lot of minutes out there, and maybe he's earned some minutes and maybe that'll be another positive going forward. Before we move on, I just want to mention, and you can comment on a couple, one more positive, they won the rebounding game. And that's kind of the way Providence plays. They're kind of an ugly team, and they like to mix it up and rebound. But Xavier actually dominated there, 37-24. But the negatives we got to point out, they still had 18 turnovers. They got to clean that up. They're not going to win games giving the ball away like that. And the other thing that I think in the last two games, I don't know if I have it for Creighton, but it wasn't great. And I have it for Providence with their free throw shooting. They're only 9 for 15, and they gotta be able to make those free throws. In fact, I think Quentin missed 2, and that's going to come back to bite them in close games if they can't knock down at least 75%, if not 80% of those free throws. And I think they can do it. They all show that at times they can make them. It's just like sometimes I think some of them get in a rush, or I don't know. But those are the things that they're going to have to clean up. But the key is maybe this is a positive that they see their hard work starting to pay off, and maybe this will lead them into a little bit of a run.
Well, I hope so, because they can definitely, I think, defensively and offensively, hopefully get this done. If they average 18 turnovers a game over their remaining games with who they have to play, they can't give those teams that many extra offensive possessions compared to them, because they're not dealing with the bottom half of the league anymore. They got everybody that they got left is in the top half.
Yeah, you look, and a great segue, and we'll look at the Big East right now, and two great wins, and we're feeling good, and we're back to 500, and there's positives, but those two teams are at the bottom of the league right now. And if you look going forward, we're not playing teams at the bottom of the league the rest of the year, so we're going to have to clean some things up. Big East standings. I'm shocked because I was watching this game yesterday, and I turned it off because it was going the way I thought it would probably end up going. And as I was doing my notes this afternoon, I was shocked. St. John's beat Villanova yesterday. I didn't know that. They came back from 14 down and beat them. And that really... Yeah, that was...
when St. John's gets hot, man, look out. They can light it up. Of course, it helps having one of the best players in college basketball on their team, because he can really get the pot stirred and get things going offensively. But yeah, I wasn't watching it. I was getting little updates on my phone, and it popped up and said that St. John's had taken the lead and looking to upset Villanova late. And I was like, wow, because I'd kind of done the same thing. I kind of watched a little bit early, and Nova's got this thing wrapped up. They're playing like they always do, and that's impressive for St. John's to pull that off. Now, that definitely makes things get interesting at the top.
Yeah, we look at the top now. Villanova stands still at the top, half game ahead of Marquette, just by mere fact they've played another game. They're 11-2, and Marquette is 10-2, and of course those two are far and away at the top. Gets a little bit tighter, but Seton Hall, who we got coming up, and we'll talk about here in a little bit, tied for third now with the Johnnies at 7-6. And then you fall down to fifth place is the Butler Bulldogs, who we still got on the schedule. We'll be going there late in the season at Hinkle. And down below them you have at 5-7 Georgetown. And then tied for seventh. It's better than where we were last week, because last week we were in last place by ourselves. Tied for seventh with the DePaul Blue Demons. We're 5-8 right now. And we talked about that 37-year streak of having at least a 500 record in the league that the Musketeers are trying to hang on to. Again, it's still a tall task, but it looks a little bit more doable than obviously where we were sitting last week. Let me ask you this question. Right now, how many teams do you think will make the NCAA out of the Big East?
I'd say 3 for sure, 4 if somebody in that, fourth place down, or so has a nice tournament run, and definitely if they'll get 4 if somebody besides the top 3, which right now that's probably Nova, Marquette, St. John's, Seton Hall, kind of throw them together. St. John's or Seton Hall will be the third. And then, one of those other two is going to have a nice tournament run if they want to be the team that gets in if they come in at fourth place, or some surprise dark horse candidate comes in and wins the Big East tournament that's not one of those top 4 teams, and they'll get 4 for sure.
Yeah, Seton Hall, Seton Hall has on their resume, if you recall, they beat UK and Maryland, who's a pretty decent team, and a couple non-con victories on theirs. I think the concern might be at St. John's. You remember their non-conference schedule was very weak. Remember, they were actually undefeated, I believe, in it, and still weren't ranked in the top 25, so they didn't have a very challenging schedule that may come back to bite them. I think if they finish the Big East out at least 500, though, and maybe win a game in the league tournament, they should be okay. It'll be interesting to see. But again, the Musketeers, they got 5 games left, and if they can win 4 or 5, and right now if they would play today, the Musketeers would have, I saw, the 8th seed, and they would play the 9 games. So they would be, actually Creighton would be the 9th seed. That's where, if it was played today. But of course, we got about 3 more weeks to go. Well, it gets much tougher, Bill. Coming Wednesday, and it's on the road again. We go to the Seton Hall to play the Seton Hall Pirates. Remind us what Seton Hall is all about, and what do we got to do to take the Pirates down?
Well, I have to get ready for Coach Willard's. I think he runs a matchup zone defense. I think he came in over the summer and actually worked with the UC Bearcats, Mick Cronin, and on running a similar defense there. So that's something that the Muskies got to be prepared for, because that'll be a little bit different than man-to-man or your typical zones. And then the Seton Hall, Miles Powell is their man. It's Miles Powell in the supporting cast. They got some decent supporters on that cast, but he's almost 22 points a game is his average in Big East play. so things all go through him, and then his supporting cast. Quincy McKnight is kind of the outside support, and then Miles Cole kicks in some help, or Miles Cale, sorry. Michael, I'm going to screw this one up. Enzi. Yep, Enzi, and Sandro Mamukelashvili. Got to say that one.
Hey, that's pretty good. That's pretty. I was going to ask you, who's their top rebounder again? I can't remember. What's his name?
That's him. I'm not going to do it twice. But yeah,
something like that.
Yep. Yeah, he's their interior strength. So, but yeah, Seton Hall everything goes through Miles Powell. So that's the guy that they got to focus on, and limit him, hold him around his average, and he'll be all right. They let him go off. It's not good.
Yeah, and he's a big time player at the end. I think he made some key shots to beat the Musketeers here at the Cintas Center. And last week I happened to catch the very end of the Creighton game out in Omaha, and he didn't have a very good game. I don't even know, maybe he only had 10, 12 points near the end, but it was tied, and he came down and drained a three-pointer, a step-back three-pointer like, he'd been doing it all his life. And so he's a big-time player. So they're going to have to limit him. But, I feel good that I feel like Quentin and Najee, probably be those two, maybe Scruggs a little bit, playing some defense on him. If they can hold him down, and hopefully the big guys can they're going to have to work hard to get some rebounds, because they do have a couple, especially Mamukelashvili, whatever his name is. He's a monster under there. He's 6'10". He's a big boy, and he's averaging over 7 rebounds a game. Pirates are on kind of a roll. They've won 3 in a row and 4 out of 5. But actually, those 4 out of 5 came after a 4-game losing streak in the Big East. So they kind of went through a stretch not too different from like the Musketeers. And then next Sunday, the Villanova Wildcats come calling. I didn't realize this. This is a nationally telecast game on CBS. Of course, you got probably the preseason schedulers looked at the last 2 champions of the Big East in a late season matchup and thought, wow, this might be a big game. Hopefully the Musketeers can make it a big game, but it's going to be a tall order taking on the Villanova Wildcats, except for the end of yesterday's game, which we didn't watch. They've been playing fairly well lately.
Yeah, I think that, they probably will continue to play pretty well. I think that'll be just fuel to their fire. You don't see them drop too many back-to-back games. Xavier will have to play one of those 4 turnover performances they've done in the past, I think, to stand a really good chance of pulling off that upset. The more times they get turned over, the more offensive opportunities they give the Wildcats, the harder it's going to be for them to overcome them at the Cintas Center. So they're really going to have to play well on handling the ball and being crisp with their passes and not turning the ball over. Villanova is led by Phil Booth and Eric Pascal. Both Booth's like 18.3 a game, Pascal's 17.3, and everything goes through those two. The supporting cast is young, sophomores and freshmen. The Gillespie kid's been playing really well as of late. He's a good three-point shooter. I think most of his shots are three-pointers, so that helps them space the floor and gives them some room to operate.
Yep, it's going to be a tough one, but a couple things going in the Musketeers' favor. I'm looking here. I know that the Wildcats played in Madison Square Garden last night against St. John's. They're on the road again at Georgetown on Wednesday, and so coming into the Cintas Center, that's at least their 3rd game in a row on the road, and sometimes in February when you go through stretches like that, it can kind of grind on you. So hopefully that gives the Musketeers a little bit of a favor. And you got to think, nationally televised game Sunday afternoon, leader in the Big East, defending champions the last 2 years, that it's going to be an electric Cintas Center that might give the Musketeers a little bit of energy.
I would hope. I would definitely be coming out with, my A game in my pocket and ready to roll in that game because, you know everybody's watching and fan base is going to be loud and supportive. So try to put a good show on for them.
And the other positive you look at, that if you take the performance against the three-point shooting of Creighton, maybe if they can again, they've been working on that and can defend the three-pointer a little bit better because, again, that usually is Nova's game, although they pretty much have an all-around game. Maybe the Musketeers can pull off the big upset and continue toward hopefully another NCAA bid. Well, any other thoughts about the Villanova game before we go to trivia?
Nothing about the Villanova game, but I would like to, I think we picked on him a little bit this year, commenting about his game, but throw out a big congratulations to Najee Marshall for his being named to the weekly honor roll this week in the Big East. I think that's the first time a Musketeer's been on there in a while, so that's good for X and Najee.
Yeah, I'd say these last two games, Najee has kind of become the player maybe we thought he was going to be earlier in the year. I think maybe we were expecting a little too much, realizing that although he had played well last year as a freshman, he wasn't the focus of the other team, and now that he becomes the focus, a little more pressure on him. But, he had a few turnovers. Still has trouble handling the ball a little bit. Of course, he is 6'7", but had a couple bit nice games this week, and I think helped the Musketeers to those two wins. So we hope to see that continue to progress. So, yeah, congratulations to Najee on his honor. Anything else before we go to trivia?
Bring it on.
This is a hard one. Although, the real hard question, we're going into the tournament. It looks like, again, I think if the Musketeers would happen to win out, they would have some quality wins. And even if they won out and got a couple wins in the tournament, might get an at-large. That's a way, way, way long shot. Looks like they're going to have to probably win the tournament. First goal, of course, is to get in that top six so they get that first-round bye. And, of course, we're getting close to that anyway. But the question made me wonder, because it's been a while. I knew it had been a while. When was the last time the Musketeers won a conference tournament? Do you know?
Ooh,
I'm pretty sure you were there.
I'm pretty sure I was, too. I want to say it was at the U.S. Bank Arena.
You are correct there.
And trying to remember the year. I think your son was with us.
Sons, maybe both of them. I was trying to. I know.
I'm trying. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the oldest one was.
We went down. Remember, we went down on the floor afterwards.
Yeah. What's that?
2 times I think I've gone on the floor after a Xavier game. The other one was up in Dayton when they beat Dayton in the tournament up there. Yeah, the year is probably going to be. But you're on to
2010, 2011, isn't it? 2010, 2011, somewhere there.
You're getting old. 2006.
Wow, it was longer than that. Your son's getting old.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and I didn't remember this, but this gives Xavier fans a little bit of maybe hope. That year, they were in the A10. They were the number 10 seed in the A10. And I don't even know what their record was, but they had to win that tournament or they were probably not going to go. They were not going to get an at-large bid. In fact, that year, the A10 had 14 teams, and you had to be in the top 12 just to go to the tournament. The bottom two, 13 and 14, didn't even get to play in the tournament that year. So as a review, and, yeah, I think we went to all these games down at U.S. Bank Arena. In the first round, they beat the number 7 seed UMass 75-66. And then they went on into the quarterfinals and beat, and I even forgot about this team being in the A-10. They beat number 2 Charlotte 59-55 in the quarterfinals. Then on Friday night in the semifinals, they beat the number 6 seed Fordham 70-55 or 59. I can't read my writing. I think it's 59. And then actually ended up playing their old nemesis St. Joe's, who was only the number 5 seed that year. So it was the number 5 seed against the number 10 seed for the championship, and the Musketeers pulled it out 62-61. And I believe that they had he ended up
Justin Cage hit the baseline jumper.
Yeah, but I was thinking St. Joe had a shot at the end too that they missed.
Yeah,
Nelson.
It was quick though.
Yeah, they had a few seconds, but and here was another. I don't know if I wrote that. Actually, going into the tournament, the number 1 seed in the A-10 that year was George Washington, and they had they were undefeated in the league that year. So they went in as the number 1 seed, and I believe Temple upset them, and then St. Joe's beat Temple in the other semifinals on the other side. They lost in the quarterfinals to Temple. Of course, they were undefeated in the league, and they went into the NCAA tournament anyway. So pretty good, Bill. Yeah, that shocked me too. You know, you think about that. It's been 13 years since the Musketeers have won a conference tournament. Of course, they've for many years had such a good record, they didn't need to win the tournament to get in. They were at-large bids. And but it looks like this year we're going to maybe need a little bit of that magic if we want to make it on much deeper into March. Well,
they shoot.
Go ahead.
They shoot 80% from the 3-point line. They stand a great chance.
If that happens, but I don't think that's going to happen. But again, I like maybe a lot of times teams just need confidence, a little bit of confidence, see a little success, and things start to roll positively, as we've seen sometimes. At the end of seasons, teams go the other way. Things don't go well, and it just kind of rolls in the negative way. So, well, we'll be watching them Wednesday night. That's a 7 p.m. tip on the CBS Sports Network. That's a little bit different. Musketeers are usually on some Fox affiliate. In fact, all week they're on CBS, and Sunday at I believe that's a 1:30 or 2 tip. They will be on CBS National. All right, so we thank the Grilling Truth Network for putting our podcast out there on a lot of different platforms, and Mike Goodpaster and everything he does. So we'll finish up tonight by saying, go Muskies.
Go Muskies.